My name is Rose Davidson, and I'm from rosedavidson.com. Welcome to How to Create and Launch a Winning Podcast in Less than 30 Days. And we'll be using my Opal system to help you to do that. Now, the world is changing, and so are the many ways we consume information. And podcasts have become such a fantastic way to stay on top of what's happening in our communities, learn about current things happening, and that things that may impact or even provide us with entertainment, when we're driving home or we're going for a walk or whatever the case may be. In this 1 hour webinar, I will show you how to create successful shows that will increase your brand exposure through broadcasting, which builds on audiences eagerly awaiting for each episode to be released. And that is the hope that every podcaster has, is that they have a returning audience. Now, there's a huge opportunity in podcasts right now, and it's an amazing time to get started and growing, because there are over 600 million blogs on the internet today, and there are 400 million active YouTube channels, but there are only less than 2.6 million podcasts available at the moment. So when you factor in that about 45% of podcasts don't make it past the 5th episode, the opportunity to start and grow and make money with your podcast is happening right this minute. The reason to start your own podcast, well, some of the personal reasons are that you're passionate about the topic and that you have something to say and something to share with an audience. It's an easy platform to create content. You can create long-form content. Podcasting can help you build your personal brand. Can be an alternative revenue source. It helps you develop different skill sets. There's minimum startup costs to starting a podcast, and podcasting can be more fulfilling than a video, because you can listen to it and not have to watch the pictures, and you can watch a podcast doing almost anything, and you can use your time more productively, I guess, your free time. You can repurpose your content, which is really great, because you can cut episodes of a video podcast into little bite-sized chunks. You can get the transcript off that and make it into blog posts or just single posts for your social media. You can target a specific audience directly. There is less competition compared to other media forms, because the platform is still growing. As I said, the stats are really, compared to blogs and videos, podcasting is very, very small. You can become an industry influencer and a thought leader. You can expand your search potential. You can redirect traffic to important pages on your website through a podcast, and there's potential to monetize your podcast. Some other reasons that you might want to start is that you can interview people that you admire. It's perfect for you if you love connecting and networking with other people. You enjoy helping other people, and of course you have access to your audience 24/7. So a little bit about me. Oh, heavens above, what's going on here? There we go. So I am an entrepreneur, a podcast host and a producer. I'm an online event manager, a podcast trainer. I've done live stream presenting. I'm an Amazon #1 international bestseller. I'm a former Brains magazine executive contributor and actually won an award in 2021. And I'm also president of a social enterprise called Healing Through Love. And we are a domestic and family violence awareness initiative that was started in Adelaide, in Australia in 2018. I've been featured on I've been featured in Mums in Business magazine. I've had articles and things published in Empowered Mums Global Business Network, on the Business Builders Group, in Business, Saving Brothers, You Matter. It's another charity organisation, and South Australian Woman. I've also been interviewed on the ABC in Adelaide and in Hobart. So this masterclass is for you if you want to start a successful podcast and you are serious about building authority and credibility for your business using podcasting. This webinar is not for you if you are not coachable and you are not committed to reaching a wider audience than you currently have on social media. So we'll get the podcast wizardry Opal system is based on 4 steps, and first step is O, for organize, and it's to lay the foundation for your professional podcast. This is where you lay the foundation for learning the importance of your legal requirements, choosing the right strategy, having the perfect name and cover art, setting up your podcast on the right channels for distribution, and setting up the perfect studio on a budget. The P of Opal is for produce, and this is where you present and host your podcast like a pro and become a podcast wizard. You must have the ability to make your interview guest feel at ease and allow them to share their information in such a way as to bring value to the listeners. The third what's happened here? Oh, the third stop of Opal is the A, which is the arranging of your podcast. And this is where having an engaging introduction will keep your audience listening longer to your podcast. And your outro should have a call to action so that your listeners know the next steps to take. And if you edit properly, everything else just becomes so much easier. And the last piece of the puzzle is the L for launch. And launching and distributing your podcast is one of the final steps in the podcast journey. Podcast distribution is defined as simply as sharing your podcast on any listening platform like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And this allows you to reach a larger audience. So just putting it rather simply, podcast distribution helps listeners find your show. The podcasting and the law, there are things that you need to be mindful of when you have a podcast, and this is so that you can avoid problems with your podcast in the future, and you need to consider your legal risks, because as podcasting grows, the likelihood of it being in the legal spotlight is increasing, and irrespective of the size of your audience, you still face exposure to legal issues. Podcasters should conduct a legal stock take to assess their legal risk and implement risk mitigation strategies. And by this, I mean mainstream media platforms, including newspapers and TV networks, often receive legal threats that their articles or TV programs are defamatory or unlawful in some way. And we've heard quite a few of that just lately in the media. So by publishing content which is consumed by an audience, podcasts carry a very legal risk. And podcasters and organizations that host these podcasts need to be alerted to the risks and any issues. And one of those things is avoiding defamation. And so as you grow, as your podcast grows, so has the risk that people who is the subject of a negative discussion may take offence to and sue you for defamation. and evaluating the risk of defamation is often challenging and usually depends on several factors. And some of these include the nature of the content being discussed. So if it's controversial or contentious, just be very aware of what you're saying and how you're saying it. Whether an individual is the subject of that content, and if so, if that individual is likely to take issue with that. And there are other things like breaching of suppression orders. If there's a court case and names or whatever have been suppressed by the court, make sure that you are assessing for misleading and deceptive conduct. So if you are incorporating ads in your podcast, particularly where you read out ads from other businesses or you post ads on your social media pages, you must take care that you don't mislead or deceive your audience. We've seen a lot of those scam things going where you get $50 off something, and when you go around to pay, it's actually not $50 at all. You end up paying that in the freight or whatever. So just be very mindful of what you're doing. Podcasters should ensure that any statements they make that are representing products or services, they are true, accurate, and able to be sustained by evidence. And the Australian Consumer Law, which is administered by the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, seeks to protect consumers from misleading or deceptive conduct. So you really need to be very mindful. It's also advisable to provide guest release forms. So regardless of the content of your podcast, if you're having guests on your podcasts, rather than just yourself, it is a really great idea to have them sign a release and consent form. And this provides more certainty over the legal relationship and your rights and responsibilities. I have one at the end of the form that I create for the guest information, and I just ask for certain things that I have the rights to use their image and their bio information that they give me in any way that promotes the video. Also, be aware of intellectual property or IP, that you're not infringing someone's IP somewhere along the line, whether that be music, literature, artwork, anything of that nature. You must be very mindful of that. You need to make sure that you, if you use someone else's IP, that you acknowledge them or indeed ask permission from that particular person before you use it. Podcasts have a broad scope to infringe on IP rights, particularly concerning copyright. That's usually to do with music. So if you're going to use background music, make sure that it's non-copyright music. And there are websites where you can download that stuff. If you're giving advice on your podcast, it's best to offer disclaimers. And by providing a disclaimer, it's necessary when giving financial or legal advice, especially, or health advice. If you're not a trained health professional and you are giving health advice, then please put a disclaimer that you are not a health professional. Next, we're going to look at choosing your program strategy. So, finding your perfect niche. Should I have a guest on each episode? And really the choice is yours on which way that you go. So what I'm saying is, are you going to be a solo podcaster, or are you going to interview guests? So you need to find your perfect niche, and that, what I mean by that is your target audience. You need to find out who your target audience is. So where mine is business owners, you may be health professionals, you may be giving diet advice or whatever of the case may be. So as with all competition, finding the right niche for your podcast is really, really crucial, and you just can't be everything to everybody. When starting your podcast, and I better get my clock up here. You want the show to appeal to everyone, obviously, but if you don't have an existing audience, you need to really narrow that down and choose content so that you can find at least a perfect audience for what you're trying to promote, because you want to stand out, and that's the basis of having your podcast. So choosing a niche helps you to more easily define the concept of your show, and it's easy to determine, and it's more likely that you'll be able to separate your show from other podcasts that are already out there. So choosing a podcast niche is one of the first steps in starting your podcast. So you need to make that decision. Who is going to be your target audience? And for some podcasters, choosing a niche can be challenging, especially if they're an expert on many subjects and have many interests. It can be a surprisingly difficult decision. I know I had that when I first started, but I decided that I was going to help business owners around the world just after the lockdown started in 2020. And I thought there's a lot of bricks and mortar businesses didn't realize that they could incorporate online portions of their business to still keep going rather than shutting their doors. So that's why I started the podcast. I thought that if I could interview other business owners who may be challenged and have overcome those challenges, and offer some advice to others, I thought that was a great way to have a podcast. So my niche is business owners, and it's continued on from there. So really the importance of having a niche is it's easy to fall into the trap to try to appeal to everybody, but that's not the way to build a following. And if you're not targeting specific people with your podcast, it will not suck anyone into listening. There is exception to that rule, however, is when you've already got a profile and people are searching for you and your specific content, and then you can be more general, because you yourself, your personal brand, are the niche. Someone like Ricky Gervais can attract an immediate audience of millions just by saying, I'm going to release a podcast about stuff that interests me, because he's already put the work into cultivating a following. How specific does your podcast niche need to be? It doesn't mean you can only talk about one thing for the rest of your life. It means finding a filter for your content. And if you're interested in starting a podcast in the fitness category, for instance, it'll be much harder to stand out if your show covers fitness rather than if you find a niche within that topic. So fitness is very broad. Find something that's within that topic that drills down a little bit. A title is really important too. It gives your show a bit of personality, and it says to people that about who you are, what you're about, all those sorts of things. So if you're going to start a niche, your first step is to write everything down. Put it all down on paper. Write down everything that you could think of, no matter how silly it might be. Don't worry about whether your ideas are enough or marketable at this point. Just write everything down. You'll end up crossing most of them off your list anyway. So here are some questions to help you come up with some ideas. What do people come to you for advice for? What are you comfortable about talking about at length? What hobbies or activities do you enjoy? What makes you excited every day? What do you feel passionate about? What would other people say would say about you as being an expert in? It's also can be helpful to browse through podcasts on Apple or Google or Spotify for ideas. You don't need to copy another show, but these might get your brain going. And think about subjects that you love. That's really important. It is essential to make a brilliant first impression. It doesn't stop at just your cover art, as you can use this design to promote your show across several platforms like social media, podcast websites, and podcast players. If you have a bland and uninspiring artwork that doesn't, really stand out, getting new listeners to your show won't be easy. Because if people are scrolling through, they'll look for a podcast cover that's bright and interesting. Your content, could be top notch, but if your potential listeners will judge the book by its cover, and it's just human nature to do that. As a podcast newbie, you can make do with the free tools to create cover art for your show. But as you grow, it's advised you get better quality designs that resonate with your brand's growth. Your cover art is an essential piece of podcast marketing, and it helps your podcast to stand out. It makes you look more professional, and it may even get you featured on podcast channels. But, you don't need to go out and get a podcast designer to do, because they can be expensive. So you can create your own cover art for free when you're first starting out. And Canva is a great place to start. They have templates in there for podcast covers. Even though there is a paid option of Canva, the free account will serve you just as well. So after signing up, go to your dashboard, click Create a Design, then make sure that the dimensions are 3,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels, because if you try to load your cover art up to a podcast channel, that is the only size that they'll accept. You can use Adobe Spark, you can use Tailor Brands, or you can pay for your podcast cover art if you've got the money behind you. 99 Designs does a great job, and you can always go to Fiverr and pay for someone there. And so there are a lot of options for you to go and get your cover art created, and but something that you're happy with and that reflects what you're going to be talking about, and it reflects your personality. It's essential to choose the right podcast channel. So which podcast hosting service is right for you? What does a podcasting hosting service do? A lot of people don't know. It's important to remind yourself that a podcast hosting service is a necessary part of creating your show. And these companies function just like a web host. You create the content and then pay someone else to store it and upload it to the marketplace, someone like iTunes. Although you can do iTunes for free, there are paid options. Different providers offer different benefits and features, and we'll talk about those later on. For now, it's just important to know that there are three prominent roles of a podcast hosting service, and these are storing your audio files, publishing the audio files to apps like iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher, and managing the back-end process like listener analytics. And the cost of each hosting service will vary. There are free ones and there are subscription ones, and subscription fees tend to match up with the features that the host provides. You can use free ones. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any at the moment. I should have written them down and I didn't, but I use SoundCloud. It's about 16 Australian dollars a month. It's good, and you can use your feed, your RSS feed, on any of things like Apple and Google and whatever, and I'll explain what an RSS feed is. This is what makes your podcast, because your RSS feed is unique to your podcast. So without it, a podcast, it's not complete. It is what powers your podcast, contains all the information that makes up your podcast and allows you to share it with the world. RSS actually stands for really simple syndication. So it's what it really is. Just think about it as a news feed or your Instagram feed. It's as posts are published, they become available for you to see. As your feed is published, then your podcast is been available to see. And podcast distribution is defined as simply sharing your podcasts on listening platforms like Apple, Google, Spotify to reach a larger audience. And so podcast distribution helps listeners find your show. And how are they distributed? Well, there are tons of platforms that provide this service, and almost all podcast hosting platforms will help you distribute your podcast to the top distribution platforms, as I spoke about earlier. You can actually set up your podcast on a budget. It's almost free to start. So make sure that you make a budget for your podcast kit. Don't go buying all the whiz-bang news stuff out there because you really don't need it when you're starting out. So you'll just, as I said, you need to have a budget that works for you and your co-hosts if you choose to have them. And this will make it easier when deciding which podcast equipment that you need. But at the very minimum, you need a laptop, which has a built-in microphone and a built-in camera. You can use those. You can use your phone. You can start a podcast on your phone. So you don't need whiz-bang microphones or USB cameras or DSLRs or any of those other things, because they're not necessary to start with. Because they're quite expensive, unless you're making money, it's really not worth it to have. You can just start off simply. I just started off with my laptop and that was all. And as I could afford it, I bought a USB camera and a USB Rode Mini. So that's it. That's all you need to start. You don't need anything else. You need to make your interview guests feel at ease. That's really, really important. If you want to be an effective interviewer, it's important that your tone of voice resonates with the person on the air. The key element in doing this involves helping your guests feel comfortable and at ease during the session, but also making sure that that you're engaging your listeners by asking questions or providing opportunities for feedback. Podcasts are the fastest growing media format in the market today, and although the industry is overflowing with exciting talent, not all podcasts succeed. But what is differentiating factor between an unnoticed and a successful podcast is the host. And as the host, it's your responsibility to engage your audience by using inflection, making your guests feel at ease, making them feel comfortable, making them, want to be there. For my format is just a coffee chat, and so it's like just sitting down with a friend and having a chat over the topic that they choose to speak about. I don't have a question and answer format that I follow. I don't like that sort of format. It doesn't suit my personality, and it certainly doesn't suit my podcast. So that's how I go about doing it. And so there are some podcast interview do's and don'ts, and we'll go at the end of this masterclass. There will be a link provided to you with the 10 common podcasting mistakes and how to avoid them, as my thank you for attending today. You always need to look and sound your best. So if you're not feeling very well, please cancel your interviews for the day or the week, depending on how you're feeling. If you've got a major cold or an laryngitis, there's no point in having your podcast. So just cancel if you're feeling under the weather at all, because that reflects in how you're treating your guest. And if you're not having a guest, then it reflects on your tone of voice and how you're feeling. And unless you want people to know what you're feeling, and want to explain it to everybody, then it's best just not to do it at all. The hypothalamus, it triggers things in your brain, and this is where the nervousness comes from when you're, worried about getting in and talking in front of the camera, which can be quite daunting for some people. But a lot of us recently did a 30-day video challenge, and I've got to tell you that the people that when they started were, and by the time they'd progressed in the 30 days, they were absolutely amazing and full of confidence. The next thing is finding your perfect guests, and where can you go? Well, I register on matchmaker.fm. You can do it for free, but if you have the paid one, then you can obviously get better features and you can do more stuff with it. I like it because that's where I get about 95% of my podcast guests from. They search for podcasts that they want to be on, and they'll send you a message to say, yes, they want to be on your podcast. And then you send back the information. They sign up to whatever forms that you might have, and then Bob's your uncle, and you interview them. And I think I've just interviewed 450 people in the last 2 and a bit years. I haven't been quite going 3 years yet. So that's quite a lot of people to find on one platform. And it's also good for them too, because you cross promote them. In the show notes, you put their details, their website details, their contact details. So that helps them to connect to other communities, and it helps communities connect with your guests. So it's a win-win on both sides, really. Tips for creating engaging content. This takes time and it takes work, but it is worth the investment. Trust me. The biggest reason to focus on producing compelling podcast episode is their ability to help you to build a loyal fan base. And I've found that with mine, that I've actually got people now in the States that follow me a lot, and they listen to all of my episodes, so it's wonderful. Make sure that you follow up with your guests. That makes for good action to say that that you've cared about your guest at the end. So I always follow up with a email thanking them for their time. Would they like to leave a review of or a testimonial of their podcast, or any feedback if they weren't happy with the interview? How I could improve, because I'm always looking at ways to improve. So I usually send out an automatic email about an hour after the podcast. And then there's one that goes out when I send the links to YouTube and to SoundCloud. I also thank them very much for their time, just to make sure that I've made them feel valued, that I've made sure that I've made sure that I've valued their time, because they're giving up their time to be with you to discuss a topic. So make sure that you make them feel that it's worthwhile for them. Know your numbers to grow your podcast. Now, this is not always easy. There are places you can go to find out how you're ranking in the world, but to me, they can be a little bit misleading. Not that they're meant to, but unless you can, really understand them, I think you just need to just keep going and don't worry about it, because you'll find out by the downloads you get from your podcast channel whether you're popular or you're not. So don't worry about the pie charts and the graphs and all that sort of stuff, because I think it's just a waste of time. For me personally, anyway. I don't know if you're into all that sort of stuff, then good on you. But yeah, to me, I just don't think it's just worth it. Unless I'm getting paid. At the moment, I'm not. I'm giving up my time for free. You can create professional. Well, you should create a professional intro, mid-roll ad, and an outro. Very important. So when advertisers purchase ad space on your podcast, they usually choose between a pre-roll ad, which plays at the beginning of the episode, and a mid-roll, which speaks for itself, that it's in the middle of your episode or plays at the end, which is the end roll or post roll. And and the costs of those ads vary. It depends on where they are placed within your podcast. So now you've done all the hard work and you found the guests, prepared the content, recorded your content, and it's time for you now to polish all that up so nice and shiny, and it's time to learn how to edit your podcast. And so this is where you learn new skills that you never thought you could learn, and they let me tell you, they come in so handy for other things that you have going on in your business. That learning to edit videos and audio is absolutely amazing. I love it. It took me a long time. It can be intimidating, and it could be a barrier to launching your podcast, especially if you don't know what you're doing. But don't worry about it. It's easier than you think. There's things like Audacity that you can use. I use Wondershare Filmora to edit my my videos, and I use VLC media for my audio. Love it. And to me, that's all I need. I don't need anything else. It's just two things. And Wondershare is a paid program, and VLC is free. You can create and monetize your podcast. You can do this through ad placement. My encouragement to you would be to get a great following first, because advertisers want to look at their return on investment. So they want to make sure that they get enough ears on their ad to make it worthwhile for them, so to spend the money with you. So yeah, make sure that you know that you've been going for a little while. Don't expect to monetize your podcast straight away unless you one of the lucky few that can get 10,000 listeners on your first episode. Because let me tell you, I only reached 10,000 episodes after a year and a half. So yeah, it sometimes takes a long time. Now you're ready to launch. Look at that, you're almost there. So launching and distributing your podcast is one of the final steps in the podcast journey, and it's defined as simply sharing your podcast on listening platforms like we've talked about, Apple, Google, and Spotify, to reach a huge audience. So below us, I'm going to tell you some stats. 20% of Americans, so the research I did was in America, because that's where most podcasts are listened to. 20% of Americans that are more than a decade old listen to at least one podcast show a month. Apple Podcasts has over 1 billion subscribers throughout the world. Radio Addict is a podcast network for Android, has recorded over 10 million downloads, and Podcaster, also a podcast network on Android, has likewise recorded 10 million downloads. So having a podcast really is worth it. How to establish yourself as an authority and why it's important. Well, we talked about having a niche and how you find your target audience. But what some people overlook is when it comes to getting ahead in their careers, you can't establish yourself as a leading authority in your field if you're simply talking about your work. You need to talk about it. You need to do and show and be it all in one package. So let's look at ways to create a personal brand that sets you apart from everyone else. So when you're building your personal brand, you want to ensure that people know who you are. You want them to know that you're an expert in your field, and you want them to understand why they should be listening to you and trust what you're saying to them. Oh, blank screen. So if you have ever asked yourself, where and how do I start a podcast? Why have a podcast if I'm not well known? And will it be profitable for my business? Well, let me tell you that Talking with the Experts was launched on the 13th of July in 2020. And I've just hit 35,000 downloads since that time. I have a global podcast ranking of about 13,000, just a bit under that. So there is no reason why you can't start a podcast. So again, the 4-step system to get your podcast running. There is O for organize. And this will lay the foundation for your professional podcast. I don't know what these are all for. I have no idea. So to get booked on podcasts the easy way, you follow. There is an ebook that I will share with you in the chat, and it will help you to get booked on podcasts so that you can promote your own podcast and share your knowledge with others, and then you can cross promote podcasts, and that it's just an easy way to again get better known in your podcast. Now I'm offering a 30-day course. It's you learn how to podcast using the Opal system that I've just shared with you, and so through the 30 days, it's a one-on-one program. I'm taking 10 people only, and it normally costs $14,488. That's how much the total value of the program is, but you won't pay that at all. There's only 10 spots available, and your investment for the 30 days is $997. And I'll put a link to the registration page in the chat directly. For the first 5 people to register, there is a early bird price of $697, and there are payment options available, which is $500 up front and one payment of $611 due in 30 days, or you can choose the second payment option, which is pay a deposit within the next 48 hours of $500 and pay 2 monthly installments of $363. And this comes back with this is backed by a 100% money back guarantee. There are conditions that apply to that, but be sure that you will get your money back if these conditions are met. And as your gift for attending, there are the 12 steps to get features on hot podcasts, and there are the 10 common podcasting mistakes and a bonus checklist for you. And I will put links to those in the chat as well, plus email anyone who's in attendance tonight. So remember, don't wait for the opportunity, create it. And if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Do you have any questions, Eve?
Yes, I do actually. I've been playing around a little bit with the things because I'm trying to make my courses online. So I've been playing around with microphones and these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering, when people do the podcasts, how do they not get the feedback from the computer if you're like if you want to use one of those nice big good microphones like they often have, how do you not get the feed? Like you need to hear what the other person's saying. So how do you and if you don't want to use one of these big sort of headsets at the same time, I'm thinking about the equipment because I've got
I'm not understanding. Like, what do you mean the feedback? So that there's no echo?
Yeah, if you're using a laptop and like I have a Boya microphone, but I can't use that when I'm recording with someone else because I can't hear them at the same time.
Oh.
Because there's only one jack out of the computer.
Well, I just use the Rode Mini. Like that's all I use. Can you see that?
Yeah.
I don't use an earphone. I just tuck that into a jar. I use the jar as my microphone stand, and I don't get any. I mean, I can hear what people say, so it's obviously something in the settings in your computer.
So you plug that microphone into your computer?
Yeah, it's a
in
USB
like the headphone jack, or is it a
no,
different...
it's into a USB.
Oh, into a USB. Okay. Yeah, because I was running around trying to find, and I was asking in different, music shops and whatever, to try and find how to do it. But I couldn't find it. So into a USB, and then you can have the speakers on, like the speakers will. So, but don't so you have the speakers on the laptop,
You
and
should
that
be able
doesn't,
to.
and it
You should
doesn't
be
give
able to.
feedback into the microphone.
No, it shouldn't do.
Oh, okay.
No.
Maybe it cuts the feedback out or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I use a program called Crisp, KRISP, that actually cuts out any background noise.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Zoom does have that ability to do that. However, I use Crisp to drown out any other noise that there might be.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll have a think about the program. I mean,
It would be great.
your what you're wanting to sell.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's as long I hope you got some valuable information
Yeah.
out of the session tonight, and I will send an email directly to you to get all the links that I'm sharing in the chat at the moment.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to do that while I'm talking to you.
I should go and listen to your podcast too, because I haven't done that yet. I haven't.
I love it.
I'm
I mean,
still
I
working
love
my way through the 30 day, that everyone else's recordings on the video challenge. So I haven't gotten that far yet.
But yep, no, it's been good. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate your time. And yeah, just let me share don't forget to save the chat. You know how to do that?
Did we do a chat? Oh,
I'm putting everything in the chat.
There you go. Yeah. I thought
you go down the bottom of the screen and click on the chat thing, or click on if you're, are you on full screen at the moment?
Yeah.
Right, there should be a chat option somewhere to open.
There isn't anywhere to, save chat. There we go. Yep.
Hang on, I haven't finished. I've got one more to put in.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
You should have all those links now, and I will share via email as well.
Okay. Thank you
so much for coming, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eve. Bye-bye.
Bye.